humanity around us can get so bad that we yearn to be somewhere as remote as possible. There are indeed some very remote places on the planet, literally in the middle of nowhere. I'm Jake the Voice Parr, and this is the list of the 10 remotest places on Earth. We start our countdown at number 10 with Rapa Nui, which is better known to most of us as Easter Island. It's the island in the South Pacific, famous for its giant human-shaped rock sculptures called moai that dot most of the island. It is also a very remote place, being nearly 3,000 miles away from the nearest landmass, which happens to be Chile, to which Rapa Nui belongs today. It's only about 70 square miles in size and home to just 4,000 people. This mythical, wonderful island is like a tiny speck in an enormous blue ocean. At number 9 are an archipelago of islands called the Kerguelen Islands. There are no native people on the islands, and the only settlements are those of French scientists, since the islands have been claimed by France. The only other living settlement on the islands is a herd of very rare French cattle that are almost extinct in France. The islands are said to be located 2,051 miles from the closest civilization, making them a decidedly remote place. No wonder then that these islands in the extreme southern Indian Ocean are also called Desolation Islands. At number 8, we are back in the Pacific Ocean, this time with islands that become famous thanks to probably the most infamous mutiny in history. Pitcairn Islands were entirely populated by Fletcher Christian and his men, who were abandoned there after they tried to mutiny against Captain Bligh on the ship called the Bounty in 1789. Today, the tiny island of just 2 square miles has less than 50 inhabitants. Orders for food must be made from New Zealand, which is 3,000 miles away, and can only be placed every 3 months. Now that's living remotely. The place known as Itaquatamit comes from the Inuktitut language and is one hell of a tricky name to pronounce. It's at number 7 on our list because its remoteness is due to it being located in one of the coldest and most inhospitable regions on Earth. It's located on a peninsula in eastern Greenland. Itself the largest and one of the least densely populated islands on the planet. Home to just over 400 people, the peninsula is only accessible by boat for 3 months every year. Think of that place with that unpronounceable name as a tiny dot in the middle of the vast tundra of the far north. At number 6 is Bouvet Island, a tiny place in the Southern Ocean that belongs to Norway and is inhabited by no one. Some people refer to Bouvet Island as the most forbidding place on Earth, thanks to its extreme cold and being closest to Antarctica, hardly full of people itself, and which is 1,000 miles away to the south. 93% of the island is covered in a glacier and is utterly devoid of any trees, shelter, or landing places. You can draw a radius of 1,000 miles around Bouvet Island and not touch any land. That is how incredibly remote it is. Speaking of the Great White South, we turn to the Antarctic Pole of Inaccessibility at number 5. A pole of inaccessibility is that point on a continent that is the greatest distance from any ocean in any direction. It makes sense that the most remote and desolate pole of inaccessibility on the planet is on Antarctica. The Soviet Union tried to make it the exact location of their Antarctic station in 1958, but they had to abandon the endeavor. So horrible was the location. However, not before the Soviets erected a statue of Lenin at the site, which must surely rank it as the most remote statue on Earth. We turn to number 4 and the town of La Rinconada in Peru. It's a small gold mining town that is considered to be the highest inhabited place in the world, being located nearly 17,000 feet above sea level. The town is located on a permanent glacier in the Andes mountain range, and the roads to get there are treacherous in the extreme. In fact, only purpose-built vehicles are able to make the trip. Being so high up and so difficult to reach is what makes La Rinconada such a remote and desolate place. Altitude sickness is a cert for any first-time visitor to this place. Tristan da Cunha is number 3 on our countdown and prides itself on being the remotest island in the world. The British territory is located in the South Atlantic Ocean and is 1,242 miles from St. Helena. Yes, that place where Napoleon Bonaparte died, and is 1,740 miles from the nearest mainland, being Cape Town, South Africa. The island's approximately 270 residents are visited by a mail ship from Cape Town just once a year. All the inhabitants on Tristan da Cunha share just 8 surnames between them, while the island is financially self-supporting thanks to fishing and the sale of postage stamps. Tristan is a remote place indeed. You may never heard of our number 2, but Changtang is a huge area stretching almost 1,000 miles across the Tibetan Plateau. This part of Tibet is known as the roof of the world, and with good reason. So high up and so vast is the landscape. It's populated by a nomadic people called the Changpa, and is completely cut off from the rest of China. In 2009, the European Joint Research Centre named the Tibetan Plateau as the world's most remote place after compiling a map showing it to be the least interconnected place on Earth. So Changtang thoroughly deserves its place on this countdown. And number 1 on our list is the remotest place in any ocean on Earth. Named Point Nemo in honor of a character invented by the great science fiction author Jules Verne, is situated in the South Pacific Ocean. Point Nemo is simply a point in the ocean. It is 1,450 miles away from the 3 islands closest to it, all of which are pretty remote and all uninhabited themselves. By the way, Nemo means no man in Latin, which is a very fitting name for Point Nemo, and for all our places on this list for that matter. Those then